This lesson's focus is taking primary colors and mixing them to make our secondary colors. So using my paints, I'm going to go ahead and start mixing some colors that are secondary. Red plus blue, yellow plus blue, and yellow plus red for this assignment. When you start working on your project, we're going to be making some really cool images of sloths. Sloths are best known for their slow lifestyle. They move only when necessary, and when they do move, their average speed is 13 feet per minute. Many sloths are the size of a small dog, and they spend their days hanging from trees, eating and sleeping. Sloths are native to rainforests in Central and South America. Now that you've got your paper painted on as a secondary color, you might want to use a little bit of white to lighten it or brighten up that color a little bit. Using the end of my paintbrush, I am going to be making some marks to make it look like a texture of sloth fur or sloth skin. As you start using that end of your paintbrush, hopefully you'll be able to see some of those texture lines. If not, try adding a little bit of water or just more paint in case it dried. Now, while that's drying, let's start moving into our background. Working on our background, I'd like you to take a small piece of paper and fold it in half. If you make a mistake like I did, just flip it over to the other side. What I'd like you to do is create leaf stencils. Each of you at your table might make one leaf and then share your leaves amongst each other. That way you don't have to come up with so many different kinds of leaves. Everyone can just share your stencils amongst your whole table. Now that you have a symmetrical leaf, set your leaf aside and save the scraps. So the paper that I normally would throw away, I'm going to be using for my leaf stencils. On my background, I grabbed a piece of orange paper, but I thought it might make a visual texture a little bit more interesting by taking a large paintbrush and using some yellow and red paint to glide or scrape across just a little bit of yellow-orange mixture to making that orange a little bit more interesting. I like the way that looks, rather than just a solid orange piece of paper. Now, while the paint is still wet, it's okay to take your yellow and your blue and start making green. So this is my third secondary color, yellow and blue to make my green. Again, if you wanted to add a little bit of white to your your paint color, you may do that to brighten up the green. That's a personal choice. Now, using that scrap paper that you made from your leaf stencils, place that onto your paper and grabbing a sponge, dip it into the green paint. Take your sponge and start filling in the area where your leaf got cut out. Do this as many times as you want to create an interesting leaf collage all throughout your painted background. I love this process. It's super cool with the different textures and different variations of green that you can create. A little bit of paint can go a long way throughout your sponge. So enjoy making this project. Some of your leaves going off the edge of the paper, some of them going to the middle of the paper. Just have fun creating an interesting and cool background for your project. Moving into your sloth body. Once you're done with your background, this guide might help you draw a sloth picture. You might want to start out drawing a big, huge sloth. Notice that the ends of my body fill up the whole page. I tried to make my sloth as big as possible. I can always make it smaller, but if I need to start over and make it larger, that would be a really long time. So really I started thinking about the body parts. Well, I knew he's got 4 legs, and I wanted to have a nice big head, and then that U shape hanging from the tree. So I started sketching out the ideas from the idea sheet, but again, I'm not worried about making it just like the idea sheet. It's just there to provide me an overall basic shape that I can utilize as a sloth body. Once I've cut out my textured sloth body, I'm going to go ahead and also grab a sheet of white paper that I can use to making the face or the eyes for my sloth. When I get started with this, start out with a piece of white paper and I just set it onto the purple paper so I had an idea about what size that I should use to make that sloth head. On my piece of white paper, I drew an oval and I got started adding on my eyes, a nose, and a mouth. I also went ahead and grabbed some orange marker to make these interesting lines or patches on the side of the head. You can use it in orange, or maybe you want to use gray or brown or any other color that you want. It's totally up to you. Cut it out and glue that onto your sloth body. Now that I've got my sloth head and body put together, I'm also thinking, since they live in a rainforest, what kinds of environment besides these interesting leaves could I provide for my sloth? So I started thinking about grabbing some green construction paper and maybe crinkling it up in my hands a little bit so that I could give that vine some texture. That green piece of paper to add to my project might be pretty interesting, just as a visual clue that my sloth is hanging from a tree or hanging from a vine. I noticed that my construction paper was also cut with a ruler, a straight edge. I didn't really want it to be such a hard edge, so I took my paper and gently started tearing the sides of my paper to make it a little bit more natural or realistic with that textured idea. So adding texture to my vines, my paper is not quite long enough, so I did this to 2 pieces of paper going across the edge of the paper. You might have yours at an angle, and that's okay too. For my final finishing up touches, I'd like to take my green paint once more and use those stencils to make it look like the green paint has a few leaves that overlap the vine and the sloth body. This really makes the sloth look like he's hanging in a real forest. This is an opportunity to show overlap or space, that some objects are closer and some objects are further away. With my last pieces of construction paper, I also felt like this is a nice finishing up touch that'll give my project some more dimension. I'll grab a black marker and add on those 3 toes or 3 feet that we saw in the video at the beginning of this project. Grabbing some of that extra green construction paper, I'm going to add some layers of collage. So it looks like I've got some different kinds of leaves that are not only printed on, but some leaves that are made out of construction paper just for a collaged or overlapped spatial look. I love the way that this finished project ends up with those finishing details to make it look more interesting visually. Different textures as well as different materials and different items to make this project really come to life. I hope you have fun and happy art making!